Welcome to Emerging Civil War. I'm Chris Mackowski, and I am delighted today to have a couple guys with whom I work with on a professional basis and whose work I admire tremendously. I want to introduce my friend Dana Shoaf, editor of Civil War Times magazine.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us, Dana.
Thank you.
And Chris Howland, he's the editor of America's Civil War.
Hi, it's great being with you, Chris. Hey, everybody.
I know many of our viewers and listeners have been longtime fans of the magazines, and when the pandemic hit and everyone was shut in, dying for reading material, the magazines actually disappeared. And so I'm so excited that the magazines are coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was scary for us, as you can imagine. In what was it, like March 18th, I think?
It was exactly March 18th.
Yeah. We just got an email that the company was suspending operations and sort of just put your pencils down and no more. So for about 7.5 weeks we were on furlough.
It was till like May 3rd.
Yeah, and they kept a couple people on to keep website and things moving, but all the print folks were furloughed. And then I can't remember, we've been back for 5 weeks, Chris?
Let's stay. Like I said, we came back at May 6th, I think was our first day back.
Yeah.
Our schedule got very condensed to the point where the two issues that we were working on of ACW, which was the July ACW and then the August Civil War Times, were basically published within 2 weeks of each other. And we had been starting them way before the furlough started. So it was an interesting process, you got to admit, Dana.
Yeah. And then we just shipped the August issue of Civil War Times, just shipped to the printer yesterday. Yeah. And it's a pretty cool feeling. It's a great feeling to have them going back to the printer. And then the next America's Civil War has to be at the printer in 3 weeks. Wow. So we're making sure we each magazine publishes 6 times a year, and we don't want to miss any issues this year. So we have this constricted schedule. And then after that, America's Civil War goes out in 3 weeks. It kind of gets back to normal.
Yeah, I think so.
Just pretty much. But we never have a lot of time between magazines. We have like 3 to 4 weeks between each issue normally. Usually 4. 3's a little short, but it's usually 4.5. And everybody that works on the titles works on both of them. Chris and I work on each other's magazines. We're the only editors in the group of 9 history titles that have responsibility besides our primary magazine. So, I read America's Civil War for Chris. Chris reads Civil War Times for me and helps out. Yeah.
So for readers who are unfamiliar with the relationship between the two magazines, would you guys mind talking just a little bit more about how those two relate and sort of the synergy that exists between them?
Do you want to start or
Yeah, I mean, that's a question. That's an excellent question for obvious reasons. And I don't know the total history of each title. Of course, Civil War Times has been around since, actually, it started in the late 50s as a newspaper kind of format.
Centennial, yeah.
Yeah, and it went to the magazine in 62. So we generally date the history from 62 on. So that's pretty remarkable. It's been around for 58 years then. And so you think of some of the magazines that have gone out of business recently or just gone to digital only, and Civil War Times is still plugging along. Chris maybe could speak a little more to America's Civil War's background, but they were published by 2 different companies at one time, and then they were purchased, together. And honestly, it's a case of every time they say, well, we should maybe just publish one of these, right? There's such interest in the Civil War. What do we have, like 25% get both, 25% of our subscribers?
It actually might be more than that, but I know you're saying it's in that ballpark.
Yeah, so like 60% at least of the folks that get different magazines. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's essentially a accounting thing where, if we combine it into one, we're going to lose people, So we've kept the two. You know, they both have to talk about Stonewall Jackson, right?
Which is fine by me, right?
Yeah, yeah. They, of course, as you contributed a cover story not long ago to Civil War Times about marketing Stonewall, which is really good. We both have to talk about Gettysburg and Chickamauga. I guess the biggest difference is Civil War Times sort of take that Times, and we do dip into the pre-Civil War era sometimes through Reconstruction. We try to have more social history in the magazine, which sometimes scares people when they hear that term, but they like it when they read it, though, you know.
And I think it does a lot to diversify the audience too.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit, you know, and then roughly speaking, and I'll let Chris take it over from here. Roughly speaking, America's Civil War is a bit more battle oriented, I would.
Yeah, I for lack of a better term, I kind of call it the grunt thing, where we look at common soldiers and battles and don't delve as much into the into the political or social aspects of the war, and let Dana do that, as you know. And it hasn't always been that way. I mean, we I think we're coming up on 30 years, or maybe we just passed 30 years of publication. And, you know, there has been, it's not something that we discuss among ourselves, trying to keep some level of, you know, distinction between the two. But I think, like Dana said, that's the best thing is, you know, the battle, we'll have a battle story every issue. We like personality pieces on certain generals. And, you know, I mean, that's essentially the major difference, and there's more space for, so
right. But, you know, but again, sometimes, I was just thinking, because I have, I could screen share and maybe show you the two most recent covers.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
You want to do that? And that way we could see, because there's some differences, but there's not so much differences as well. It's very tricky. And really what it boils down to, Chris, is the appetite for Civil War history is still so vast, you know, that it could support these two magazines. Plus we have competitors out there that are being, you know, purchased as well. So, and we can get into, after I show you these covers, if you want to talk about sort of scary times for Civil War a little bit right now, if you want to, we could talk about that. But let me screen share, you'll have to allow me to do it.
Oh, okay. I thought I had the.
Yeah, that's okay.
There. Let's see.
No problem. Oh, okay. Now you're sharing your screen.
Now I'm sharing my screen. Look at that.
That's a beautiful
writer. Nobody said that there would be technology involved.
That's all right.
My screen.
Never hurts to add a little spice to the broadcast.
There we go. Okay. Now, is that letting you work on it now?
Let's see here. Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
So here is in my messy desktop here. Takes it a second to bring it up. Can you see all this okay?
Oh yeah, Mosby's Men.
So Chris, you want to talk about this? This is the cover of the magazine. It was delayed when we went on furlough, that just went out not too long ago.
Yeah, it's and obviously the cover story there, I mean, everybody knows about Mosby, but we decided to take a look at the partisan rangers who rode with him, and sort of their stories. So it's a very colorful, entertaining story, and I don't know if it was written by Eric Buckland, who's you know, one of the top Mosby experts in the country, and like I said, it's a very colorful piece, as was Mosby's, and you know, like I said, it's he's one of those colorful characters. The problem, and we can talk more about it when Dana shows you his cover, the Confederate aspect of it. But like I said, that we like these covers that are more, you know, drawings, paintings, that level of cover. So Dan, why don't you show them your cover, and then we can talk about the
Okay.
great times.
And Mosby seems to me to be one of those guys that will always draw attention. He's one of those endlessly fascinating figures.
Well, and I have to say too, if Chris doesn't mind me saying so, this is a really different approach to Mosby to take a look at these individual Ragers. And Bucklet has done a lot of research about where these guys live, where their houses were located, and what happened to them after the war, and all kind of cool stuff. That I think, even if you like Mosby and have read a lot about Mosby, it's new information. It really is. Some of these characters that, you know, all walks of life that rode with him. And it actually, you know, it's kind of mystifying to think that these guys could kind of meet up with Mosby, go raid somewhere, come back and go home. And they were able to do this pretty much the whole war and get away with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the federals in the area couldn't really stop them.
And most of them, strangely enough, went right back into loyal Union or U.S. citizens after the war. The way they were during the war, obviously that was a little surprising, but they were very good citizens afterwards, as Eric points out in the story.
Well,
very colorful, entertaining story.
I think that too, you know, Mosby was like that, their leader, you know. When the war was over, he was like, okay, you know, we got to go back to being citizens. So they might have followed his example the whole way through.
Yeah. This reminds me of something that you and I have talked about in our email correspondence in various times. Where here you're looking for new information, you're looking for something that tells us about the people. I know that you're always on the lookout for good feature stories that add some human element to people who might be familiar, but maybe have this component that really is worth kind of drawing out. Yeah,
and we've been really fortunate. You know, there's still a lot of new stuff out there about the Civil War, and there's new ways to approach it. You know, and I have some friends like, well, how do you find out anything new about the Civil War? And it's like, well, there's stuff out there. And I'll get into that in just a second. This is the most recent Civil War Times cover. We just shipped this to the printer yesterday. And there's a number of things about it. The feature article is by Matt Sproul, a former battlefield guide at Gettysburg. He's just released a book on the University of Tennessee Press. They have a series, and it's 20 decisions that decided the campaign at Battle of Gettysburg. And it's a neat look at these sort of brigade and corps level decisions. And, you know, it's honestly, you know, these things can be fun, right? It's okay if they're fun and you know, and interesting. And so I think it's a fun, interesting article. And of course we have Lee on the cover, which is a sort of the sad thing for us is, Chris, we're not on the newsstand right now because the bookstores are still closed.
Right.
And both these covers would have been big newsstand winners, really, you know, with Mosby and this beautiful Lee cover. But, you know, it kills us that we do these. And, you know, I mean, it's great to obviously our subscriber base that is loyal. We have an 80% renewal rate, which is almost unheard of in the industry. And I can't say enough about how much Chris and I appreciate our subscribers for their loyalty.
Absolutely.
And then we sell also on the newsstand, and you know, you try to come up with these covers that, you know, that appeal to the subscribers and the newsstand. And I think this would have been a good one.
In fact, I happened to be in Barnes & Noble this morning, and I noticed how empty the magazine racks all were.
They're not accepting magazines at this time, I guess because they're being shipped in and, you know, they're like, where are they coming from, that sort of thing.
They're not all open.
They're not all open. You know, it's one of the things we're going to have to deal with here. But, you know, there's a couple things. I won't talk about everything on this cover, but the overline is an example of what you're talking about, this new stuff. A current battlefield guide named Jeff Harding and a genealogist named Mary Pitkin have basically tracked down sort of the true story about General John Reynolds' secret fiance. And who she really was and what happened to her after the war. and it's brand new material, and we actually hit the brakes and put this thing in with a few days left to go. We had another article in place at this fellow, actually Wayne Mott's at the Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, called me up and said, "You want a shot at this article?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." So I talked to Jeff, and we got it in and made it work. And it's really fascinating about what happened to Kate Hewitt after the war. And there was speculation. In 2005, a booklet came out talking about Kate Hewitt, but that booklet is basically wrong, and that story is not correct. And so they found some pretty interesting stuff about what happened to her after the war and where she ended up.
Yeah, and sort of adding on that, there apparently were two Kate Hewitts that live within 20 or so miles of each other in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And everybody, because the Kate Hewitt that had been married to, or had been engaged to John Reynolds and had gone into the Daughters of Charity in Emmitsburg, the famous story of that, had actually ended up getting married afterwards. So she had a different name. But again, it's a fascinating story.
There were two Kate Hewitts living very close together in the Albany, New York area, basically. So it's cool. It's really cool. And and then we have a great, first-person accounts by Union artillerymen, and we have a personality profile here as well, Marcellus Crocker. The Lee cover, some people said, "Why are you putting Lee on your cover at this time? Isn't that you're a little afraid of that?" And I address in my editorial that, we're not going to stop studying the Confederacy.
Right.
We're not glorifying the Confederacy. We're studying it and trying to comprehend it. And we study all facets of the conflict. And of course, Lee, I don't have to tell anybody watching this, had a huge role, in the Civil War. And we're going to have Confederates on the cover from time to time. So
that's a gorgeous cover. I mean,
it's a sketch, which is even crazier. It's not a photograph. It's a sketch from an image. And it's just, Lee moves north. He's looking like, that. So we work on those things. A lot of thought goes into covers and cover lines, and it's where we put a lot of our energy. Actually, we can't break the habit. We knew this wasn't going on newsstands in the previous one, but we still are in that mode of trying to make it the most attractive, exciting cover you can.
Well, and you mentioned the time that goes into some of the headlines and the overline here. You've got 7 words to grab someone's attention. It's really hard to write that tight, that concisely, and that compellingly.
Yeah, you have to tell a micro story in basically 3 lines. So that's often the main story is, Lee moves north, Gettysburg, 20 faithful decisions. It's a little micro story, and that can be hard to do. And it really takes all of us to kind of, like for American Civil War, Chris will work on them initially, and then, he kicks it out and people weigh in. And on this, I put initial lines together and then I kick it out, and Chris and other folks weigh in on it as well. So, yeah.
If you want to go back to my cover a second.
Sure.
We obviously don't have the decision. We don't have the overline at the top, and we usually try to contain it to 3 stories. But with that said, we do want to we do put a lot of effort into making that, getting that impact in there, so that people, especially if they see it on the newsstand, will definitely turn their heads and pay attention to it. One thing I do want to mention on the cover, because you were talking about things, I'm sort of an underdog kind of person. So a lot of times if a story comes in where it's not a well-known story, I'd like to give attention to that. And one of the stories on there is called Ohio Gunners at Gettysburg. And it's the sort of overlooked battery that's at the corner of, where Gettysburg College is, right there on the corner. What is it? Carlisle and
I
They
can't
made
remember.
they made the stand on day one that sort of bought time for the for the 11th Corps to get back to Cemetery Hill and the First Corps, and nobody really knows about them because their monument is so much farther out, on a corner of a college campus.
Kind of blends into the campus a little.
Yeah, so I love that story. We have some historic pictures of from the 20s of this monument, the way it looked and stuff like that. So those are the kind of stories that I definitely love doing. I'm also a big, as Dana knows, a big Western theater fan. It's an inside joke that Shiloh's my favorite battle, so we always have little jokes about that. But I like to give some attention to, like the in this case it was the Missionary Ridge. So we had a first person account that was very interesting about someone who led that rush up Missionary Ridge on November 25th. So anyway, so that's another thing that we try to do on our story, on our covers.
Yeah.
Things that I really admire about what both of you guys are doing with your magazines is keeping things fresh, finding new ways to tell stories, new information to tell stories. And Dana, I know you in particular have really made an effort to connect with modern events to show why Civil War history remains relevant and vibrant and interesting. I mean, and so you guys are both just doing such interesting things with those magazines. Is that what kind of challenge is that for you guys?
Well, it is a challenge, but it's almost a double-edged sword. Civil War has been very prominent controversially for the past, 5 years at least.
Right.
And so, we didn't have a hard time when we did our Confederate flag story or the monument story we did. Was that 16?
A couple of years ago. Well, the flag story, I think, was 2015.
Yeah. And then we did another story called, another cover story, Do We Still Care? Which was a fairly recent issue. Is there declining interest in the Civil War? Do people still care about it? And I think it's evolving. So right now it's, we could both cover more monument issues, but honestly, I think it is so ever present in the news cycle, changing so quickly. It's hard for us to handle that because, we're not a news magazine, and a lot of times stuff happens, and by the time our magazine comes out, a month or a month and a half has gone by the time if we write about it. So recently we've actually kind of met about it, and I said, I think we have a pandemic, we have all this stuff going on. I think people just want to dig into the history. The controversy's there, they can consume that all the time. I don't want to beat the readers on the head with that again, at this time anyway. I acknowledged it in my editorial, this most recent issue, but and sometimes there's just almost unintentional ways, we can connect with the past when you talk about, for example, an immigrant officer or something, when we've had these immigration debates, and you don't always have to say, hey, look at this corollary. I think the readers are smart enough to kind of pick up on that and look at it however they want to choose without us saying so.
Right. So,
and again, when you have this new content coming out, like the Mosby's guys and the, Reynolds' fiance, that's, that kind of helps. That's as much, people want that, our readers want that as much as they want sort of ties to the current situation.
Yeah. Now, I have to admit, Dana, you've just been photobombed by your dog.
I know.
All our viewers are going to be like, oh, tell us about the dog. So
I'm going to actually that's Franklin. He's 12 years old and a Cocker Spaniel. And he wants out of the room now because my wife was on an errand. She's home and he hears her. So, I thought he would sleep through this. To my great, let's see what he does here. I might have to open the door and let him out. Do you mind?
All right. That's
okay.
All right.
Let me just do that real quick. I'm sorry. Come on, buddy. Let's go.
And I told Chris I would actually ask him about his hockey jersey in the background there.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's I have been a Washington Capitals hockey fan. I've lived. I was born in Kansas. But I've lived most of my life in this area, and I was a Capitals fan from the very beginning when they were real bad. I've always loved hockey, and so 2 years ago when they won the Stanley Cup, that was that was like one of the great moments of all time. But like I said, it's there covering something up. But this is what you're supposed to look at, all these books over here, you know.
Well, and that's one of the things about this Zoom boom is everybody gets to show off their libraries, you know.
I know. Yeah.
I mean,
so when you guys came back from the furlough, you had to get the magazine together. Can you walk us through, like, it must have been a crazy rush to like suddenly have to get some magazines out the door real quick.
Well, I guess the fortunate thing was a lot of the American Civil War issue was done.
Yeah, we were actually a week from ship when
wow.
So that was a little easier. But Dave, right, yeah.
And then when we started back up, the hardest thing for me was to kind of get into the rhythm of work again. You know, you're not doing it for 7.5 weeks. And the first week was kind of like, you know, kind of getting back into it and everything. And then it was, we were pretty well prepared with the issue with we knew what was going to go in it for the most part, and we had worked on it already. But yeah, I mean, everybody had to put in this time around some evening and weekend hours to get it done. And it's not always like hours on a Saturday, but you might have to sit down and work for an hour or two to, you know, because the art director's done something, you want to knock it off and get out of the way so you can keep things going. The next 3 weeks, I think, may be the most hectic period we're going to face, actually, because it's really short turnaround for a magazine. I've never put one out in this short turnaround, so nor is Chris, I don't think.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that is positive, and I think it's showing in the quality of the magazines, is there is a great deal of continuity between, you know, the fact that we're all friends and you know co-workers, and we have a similar passion for what we're doing, and that really helps us, you know. The sad thing about the pandemic, obviously, is we're working from home, so we're not in the office doing this, but we've been making it work, and I'm very pleased with what we've done considering that, and then we'll see what happens with this issue coming up.
Because you guys it's not just one magazine, like you guys are also like lining up content for the next few.
Yeah, we have, if you figure we have 4 features, I'm terrible at math. What's 12 times 4?
48.
48. We're putting out 48 Civil War features a year between the two titles. That is a huge amount of Civil War content. Right. And magazines are a little deceptive. They don't look like a book, but when you add up the amount of words between the departments and the features, you're basically putting a small book out in 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
Which a small illustrated and designed book.
It has to look beautiful.
It has to look beautiful. And people say, what's more important, design or content? I'm like, I think design, content, and art are all equal. Of course, you have to have good content, but yeah. Magazines they're not like books. Magazines need illustration and design to make them work, you know? I mean, books have design and illustration, but you know what I mean? You know, you have to have something that's appealing to the eye to make them work. And I do love my job, and Chris loves his job, but it's not like we sit there and we say, well, you know, if Early had just pushed on July 2, the whole, you know, we don't sit around and talk, you know, we have a lot of admin and nose to the grindstone kind of stuff you got to get done.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of coordination between people, and every day you have to coordinate and keep people notified as to where things are. the one advantage, and I think this is true for all the editors in the HistoryNet group of the other magazines. We're not just journalists. I always consider myself a historian first. We're really truly passionate about the subject. And like Melissa Wynn, our director of photography, is as well. And our other editors may not be quite as passionate, but they do find it interesting and intriguing, and they do care about having a good product of history for people to consume and understand the value of history and why it's important. So we have a really good dedicated crew of people. So when you have these, like short turnarounds and stuff, I mean, people care, about it and work hard to get it out.
I think it makes a big difference too, because as someone who loves history, you know what you want to read, you know what kind of people want to read. And so you really work hard to make sure you're delivering that kind of product.
Yeah. I think we both look at it like, would we want to read this? Do we think this is cool? So.
Well, and one thing, like I said, I've studied military history beyond the Civil War in college, a lot of World War II, a lot of World War I. The one thing I absolutely love about the Civil War that I do not want to be taken away is the ability to visit battlefields. There is when I visit a battlefield, and hopefully Dana agrees, there's a certain level of awe that you get when you stand, and you find things every time you go. If you just explore, there's just something about being able to visit battlefields that just really is a special aspect of our job, and I can do it nonstop if I had the time. But right, Dana? I mean,
yeah, we're fortunate, and we live in an area where we can get to those battlefields very, very frequently, right. Which is really inspirational. I live literally at the foot of South Mountain. I can be in all the fighting, the gaps where battle took place on September 14th in less than 10 minutes. Yeah.
And I'm 10 minutes from Second Manassas.
Yeah. And we go to those places because we like to. We have travel departments in both magazines because we want to encourage people to get out on the battlefields. We've sort of shifted away recently in Civil War times because we had a department called Explore, and we're suspending that during the pandemic because that was a lot of the places, not everything is open, you know what I mean, right, right now. And so, and honestly, I kind of was like, I'm not sure I feel comfortable encouraging people to go to these places right now. And or if they want to go on their own, that's one thing. But we're kind of looking at our next one. It was in a urban area, and there were a number of the museums and whatnot that we were going to profile were not open or had limited hours. So we've pulled back for a while. We want to get back to that when things sort of return to, when this thing clears up. Chris is keeping his travel department trailside because it's more, and you can go into this, more of a driving tour. People can drive and not necessarily have to get out and go into places, but you can explain.
We have a relationship. We do this with Civil War Trails, which has, I mean, you'll see their signs by the road everywhere, and usually what we'll do, as Dana says, it will be a something where you don't have to commit to going inside in most cases, and interesting sites and things like that. But we when the pandemic hit and we started to have this discussion, what should we do? Like Dana said, I think the fact that there's that little bit of a different aspect to what we do with Trailside makes it a little bit easier to, get over the social distancing, thing where people can still do it. So
what I love about this part of the conversation, though, is you guys are, talking about your responsibility as communicators and editors, and what are the ethics involved with the content that we're putting in the magazine, and what are the choices made around those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Many readers probably aren't even thinking behind the scenes like that. And I just think it's wonderful that you're giving us that view into behind the scenes and how your thought process and your responsibilities as communicators work.
Well, I was driving somewhere and I was thinking about this next issue after we had started back up, and I just thought, oh my God, I can't put that Explore department in there, I'm not, it was like I said, it was an urban city. We had already contracted a writer for it. And I got home and I looked, and I'm like, a number of the places weren't open or on limited hours. And, I'm like, I talked to my managing editor. I said, I think I need to suspend this for a while. And I want to also, I'm going to say something because it's come up, and I think it's important about African-American history, because that's a very topical thing right now. And, both of our magazines, we have African-American history, and every year we do that. But, with the recent events, I took a hard look at my content and at myself, and I thought, I'm not doing enough. So we're going to start a department in Civil War Times with the next issue called In Focus. And that will, that's the working title right now. And it will always feature African-American story, civilian or military or personality. Because I think I haven't done enough really to communicate all those stories. And there's some fantastic ones in there. There's some great images out there. And there's images, I know a lot of collectors, because I collect photography, dabble in it myself. There's some amazing African-American photography that, you don't see in the books. They're not common, Mm-hmm. And I know a fellow has this just incredible image of a African-American sailor. And, that's just one story, the number of African-Americans that served in the Union Navy on integrated warships. And we know about that, but we want to talk about that experience in every issue, not just a few times a year. So, you talk about changing currents and everything. You look at both of our magazines and you look at it 10 years ago, how many, and I almost even hate to bring gender into it, but how many female writers did we have? I don't know if we had any, but like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And now both of us, and I don't mean this sound can sound sort of hokey. I don't really think of them as women historians. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
At this point, like Susanna Ural's just a great historian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My friend Leslie Gordon just does great work. And so that's been a big change in the magazines. There's been a huge sort of gender change and integration. And
that's my dog.
and so, one of the things about both of our titles is that if you go back and you look at the covers, and you could see historiography of the Civil War change by looking at the covers of the magazines, what's featured on there. So they do shift and evolve with the times, but the one thing that's consistent is that we look to put in good, unbiased, well-researched history of all facets of the period. Yeah.
Like as editors, you have to be proactive and not reactive about your content and how you're developing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And Dana mentioned we've tried to, we have a department called Hidden Heroes, and we've tried to sort of balance that between unknown women heroes, African-American heroes, Confederate heroes, and Union heroes. And it so happened that we had one this issue about two overlooked heroes and naval heroes that were Black down in the Mobile Bay. So
we're getting our second dog of the program today.
Yeah, this is Ovi, named after a great hockey player, but he's I don't know. But so that is like very appropriate right now, and it is interesting how many people take for granted the African American commitment to the Civil War. it is eye-opening when you look at those stories. So.
And that's something that we're wrestling with at Emerging Civil War too. I'll say is that just there are these stories that we could do a better job of telling.
Yeah.
How to engage ourselves to be able to do that. So.
Right. It's a challenge, and but it's so important, to kind of keep evolving and recognizing things like that, and you were saying, how it ties into current cultural activities, and that's a good example, with the I think there's a lot more interest now in African American history, even before some of the recent issues. It's been growing. It has. Yeah. And so I just was like, I need to do a better job with that, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that you guys are exhausted from your sprint to get the latest issues out. You got more to do. So before I let you go, though, any final, anything you want to add to the conversation? Any previews you want to give us to what's coming up?
Well, our next issue of Civil War Times is going to feature a very interesting battle story about the cornfield at Antietam. Also an interesting story, Stephen Stottlemyre, who wrote a recent article about defending McClellan after Antietam, has done another article because McClellan is often criticized for staying at the Pry House, and Stottlemyre has actually found a number of first-person primary accounts where McClellan did cross the creek and was on the actual battlefield.
Oh, wow.
And so, he's kind of trying to correct some of the record on that. And that's going to be our next issue, which I haven't really got too much into right now because there's a couple other articles as well. But those are sort of the two big things. Kind of a new look at the cornfield fighting and this interesting new look at McClellan at the front at Antietam. And also, I just want to thank the subscriber base for staying so loyal and for writing letters in and communicating with us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And when I used to be able to get out before all this, I love to meet readers and talk to them. And I hope I can do that again soon too. It's always nice to see them.
And and that's the thing about Dana and I think, like when we get letters from subscribers, it's not like we just pass, we respond personally to them because we appreciate that. The number of emails I've received about people wondering, not knowing about our situation and wondering where the magazine was.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it was actually a lot. And like I said, I answered each one of those personally and just, we depend on them. They're our lifeblood. And so, it's great.
I feel fortunate that I get to work with both of you on a regular basis, and it's just such a privilege. And what you guys do for the Civil War community through the work that you do, and keeping that story on the front lines, and keeping it accessible, and keeping it beautiful looking and relevant is just so important for the history. So thank you both for what you guys are doing.
Thank you for having us, Chris. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who's watching.
Yeah. Take care.
All right.
Chris Howland, Dana Shoaf from Civil War Times and America's Civil War. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm Chris Mackowski for Emerging Civil War. We will see you online and on the battlefield.